Friends, welcome into another edition of the Soccer Tejas Podcast. I'm Alex Parra. Thanks to all of you that are joining us, that have followed us, and that once again in 2025, hopefully are part of our family. It's always an honor and a pleasure. And why don't I get right to it, bringing in the two amazing individuals that make this kind of bearable for most of you, and you don't have to sit here and listen to me for an hour. Now you see him on screen. Let's begin with the one and only Laura Gomez. First of all, Laura, good afternoon, good evening, good day. How are you?
Good. I'm so happy to be back. There's so much to talk about: the good, the bad, the ugly, and the most ugliness of soccer. So happy to be once again on the mic.
Well, it took a while to negotiate with your agents, your
It was,
lawyers, and we finally agreed to terms. So that was part of it. By the way,
yeah.
a few of your fans were asking for this podcast this weekend, Laura. I was impressed.
Yes, my parents are my loyal fans for sure. They're always been there since day one.
They have been. By the way, I had the honor to meet them, to spend a few minutes with them. What a lovely family. I have no idea how you came out of that.
Things happen, Alex. Things happen.
Things happen. You know, we're not all perfect, but it was great to meet your family. Next to, and you can see him on screen, many of you know him and love him. Maybe some of you don't, but here he is, the one and only Victor Araiza. Victor, how are you? Great to see you. Happy New Year in March.
I suppose, yeah, Happy New Year's for those that we haven't talked to since the last episode we've done. Obviously, we've been keeping up with some coverage through our website, through our digital channels, but just in case somebody needed to hear it from us, there you go. And you know, like it was said, the good, the bad, the missing as well. So we're going to add that to the palette, to the list.
Absolutely. Victor, Laura, it's always an honor to be with you. And let's get the show started. And by the way, friends, any of you that have questions or comments, please find us on social media. I don't know the half of it, but I know that there's the X and the Facebook and the Instagram. What's this new one, Victor, that I just signed up for? I liked you on
Blue
it, or
Sky.
I followed you. What's it?
Blue Sky.
Blue Sky. There you go. I had no idea this existed. And yes, someone much younger than me helped me figure that out. But I'm on it for the moment. So thanks to all of you that watch us, that listen to us, and that spend time with us. The good, the bad, the ugly, and the missing. I think we have to start our podcast here in 2025 with what could have been, what wasn't, and what many expected to be for the first time with Miami, Leo Messi, playing at Shell Energy Stadium. Victor, you and I talked about this in the lead up. You were hesitant to literally purchase tickets, to literally invite family, because you weren't sure if Messi would actually play. I think you had a sentiment, a feeling, an idea that he wouldn't. Your take on Messi not being here, clearly it didn't matter on the field. The Inter Miami CF destroyed the Houston Dynamo. We'll talk about the game itself. But Victor, not having Messi, it affected a lot of people in different ways, and I think rightly so. There was an expectation that arguably the best player in the history of this sport would have been at Shell Energy Stadium, and he was not.
I think we were all anticipating it being one of the more magical nights in the history of Houston soccer. It didn't came to be because I think, you know, that was the main attraction. No disrespect to Luis Suárez, who had a great night, and obviously was a good consolation piece to see him and Jordi Alba and Busquets. You know, they aged like fine wine, and I think, again, for the fans that were able to make it out there, you know, at least there was a show, right? There was 5 goals. Perhaps if you're rooting for the home team, it wasn't the greatest night, but again, the big story is no Messi for this game. And it comes with the territory. It's been a story in MLS. It was a story in other cities, you know, last year. Chicago, Vancouver, Orlando, I think twice. All these cities have had instances where they were expecting to see the best player in the world, shelled out big price, big money, big exorbitant prices from teams charging what has been, again, a custom in MLS of overcharging, we should say. And, you know, to a certain extent, you have angry fans that maybe expected because, the advertising shows Lionel Messi potentially coming to your city, and then when you show up and you don't get what was somewhat advertised, at least, because I know there's no guarantees and the card is subject to change. It does leave a lot of people with long faces, perhaps not completely depressed, because, I mean, again, it's professional sports. It happens. But he didn't show up in Houston, and Miami didn't need him.
Laura, your take on him being Leo Messi not being present, was it a disappointment? Is this just part of professional sports? Victor and I talked about this during the week, that in the NBA this is happening. The load on players is getting heavier and heavier. The load that Messi has in the different competitions. Was it justifiable?
I think that, first of all, a team shouldn't rely on selling their tickets on an opponent, star. And I think that's a sentiment that a lot of people kind of felt. If you guys haven't had a chance to check out our website, please do so. And there's an article there that we kind of, between Victor and myself, gathered a lot of responses. Some of them were positive, some of them were negative. But one of the things that I kept reading was that we shouldn't rely our marketing strategies or selling our tickets. And when I say ours, as a city of Houston, the sport of soccer and the professional team, which is the Houston Dynamo, to rely on an opponent's superstar. Yeah. We should be able to fill up our own stadium with our own players. I did feel bad for the little kids that wanted to go to the stadium, the people that, paid extra money, because the tickets are more expensive when there's a player like Messi, and for them not to show up, it is sad. I think that it was something that a lot of people, were upset. And I think that they've spent money that they perhaps wouldn't have spent as much money on. And based on the imaging and the things that I saw, because I didn't go to the game, because I was like, I don't think that Messi, honestly, I didn't think Messi was going to go in the first place. And secondly, I knew that we weren't going to be able to talk to them or do interviews, even in an open zone or anything like that. So I was like, I've seen him play before. There was no reason. I just felt bad for the kids, and the kids that were wearing the Messi jersey, and the parents that that took the kids and things like that. But I think this is a good opportunity to really assess as I don't know, maybe as the owner of the Houston Dynamo and the marketing team and the communications team, to see what other strategies they can do. And sometimes it's not the communications call or the marketing team's call; it's the owner's call, and they just do what they're told. But I do think that we seem, I don't want to say to use the word desperate, but yeah, it's kind of desperate to sell tickets, promoting just one player, and this is the biggest game of the season, and just so much marketing around that, which I don't know. I think that we have to sell our own first.
Look, I think we're going to talk about
who are we going to sell?
Yeah,
Bossy,
and that's what we're going.
You.
Yeah, Victor. We saw it on the field. There is a huge difference between now the best team in the MLS, arguably, and then the team that's right now in power rankings, number 30, which is the Houston Dynamo. You just can't hide that. You can't hide the defensive lapses. You can't hide the lack of, even though you have equal possession to another team, not creating offensive opportunities. That said, Victor, I defend the Dynamo organization in the sense that this isn't their fault. They didn't make the call not to have Messi there. And who rightly, by the way, officially a sellout.
Well, but they also didn't need to apologize. I mean, it's not, again, if they have no control over that, there's no need to apologize. There's no need to issue a statement saying, you can express your disappointment,
sure,
you can address the reports, but, when you're handing out free tickets for a future game, first of all, I don't even know if the people that came to this game are the ones that maybe aren't Dynamo fans or don't live here, maybe came from far. We know there's long drives, could come from Louisiana, Mexico, somewhere else in the state of Texas, maybe flew in here for
sure,
Sunday night soccer because this was, billed as a big event for the league. But in the end, you think they're going to come back to watch the Houston Dynamo? I mean, that's not what they were interested. The attraction was Messi. And again, maybe if the home team had a player to look forward to, they would show up for that. What it does prove is that there's people that are willing to shell out big money to watch soccer if it's a product that attracts them. And there's more people that risk paying for this ticket, even if it's just the the hope that Messi will play in it, other than coming to any other Dynamo game this season. So maybe therein lies a lesson for the home team.
So let's address then is there a fault here? Is there a responsibility? Victor, I look at it as this is par for the course. Athletes get injured. Athletes have to monitor their minutes. I don't feel defrauded. I don't feel that anyone said, no one promised, as you have mentioned. Of course, the advertising was clear that Messi was coming. Since it was on the schedule, everyone targeted that date, including the club, to sell tickets. But legally, and we talked about this, is there a class action suit here? I don't think this goes.
Maybe somebody will try, but I mean, cards subject to change. I'm sure the league has that covered.
Absolutely.
But he was on their promotional art for the league's website, for the Dynamo website. That all changed Saturday after the reports started coming out. First the Miami Herald, then ESPN. So again, I think it comes with the territory. I'll disclose this. I bit the bullet. I bought tickets to the game. I didn't risk anything that I couldn't afford to lose. I think that's maybe the approach that you have to take. I'm sure there's other people that took a bigger risk. Again, some of these prices, it was hard, to depending on where you wanted to be in the stadium. More than likely, you had to shell out at least $200 per ticket. But again, and more so probably for the amount of tickets that I wanted to buy, but I bit the bullet. I said, I'm not going to try to risk this till last minute because, again, for the amount of members of my family that I wanted to take to this game, there's other people that waited and maybe it worked out for them. There's other people that didn't find out until they got to the stadium that Messi wasn't going to be there. That probably has to do a lot with the coverage around the sport in this country. But, again, to that end, just the thought of maybe even going there for that moment. I mean, and it doesn't mean you're automatically a Miami fan. I wasn't rooting for Miami. My family was rooting for Miami. We were there because it would have been a nice moment, a historic moment for the city of Houston, for Messi to face the Houston Dynamo for the first time ever in that stadium, the intimacy of that stadium. And it didn't happen. And again, and there's a backlash that comes with that. And there's the criticism that comes with the statement as well, because I've seen there's been different takes on it, but maybe more negative than positive, and maybe therein lies a lesson for that as well.
So let me,
Victor,
go ahead. I'm interrupting you because there's another layer to this. There's so many layers to this, and we haven't even talked about what happened on the field. The other layer, and I know that you, Laura, are a big rodeo fan. Is that the reason why this field or why this game wasn't booked at NRG? Imagine that. Imagine if the game had been booked at NRG. I haven't had an official word. My sentiment, my belief, my take is that the reason it wasn't at NRG is because of the rodeo, and that's a legitimate, direct conflict of scheduling. Rodeo rules, they're never going to change the rodeo, no matter, even if Messi comes to town. But can you imagine if this had been later in the schedule or opening night in the schedule? And like other cities, Victor, Laura, you know this, they have moved to bigger stadiums to accommodate Miami.
Well, NRG tried to have him last year for the Leagues Cup. They scheduled the Tigres Miami match, and Messi wasn't able to make that one. So there was a bunch of Tigres fans there that night, or Miami fans too, that didn't get to see him. So it's already happened in Houston, and of course that probably part of the reason because of the Argentina in the Copa America, which Messi was in town for that game.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to predict, right? And again, you don't hold the cards when you're not Miami, and I get it from their perspective too. They have an asset. They're probably trying to sell tickets for Thursday's game for the CONCACAF Champions Cup. They're also trying to win that tournament among many others. So, I get it. Again, this is no different than in the NFL where, maybe it's Texans Chiefs if it were Week 17 and the Chiefs are already, wrapped up their first round bye and they're going to rest Patrick Mahomes. I think, people understand, right, that this could happen. But again, I think just the thought of Messi potentially being there was enough for fans to buy tickets. Even with the amount that was being charged, and I think that's the other part of the story is how much of a say did the Houston Dynamo have in setting the ticket prices? Was this something dictated by MLS? Because if it was by the league, I think they can wash their hands somewhat off of this, right? But if they raise the prices, right, and maybe I don't know if it's an admission of guilt giving out the free ticket, but I think therein lies the
responsibility,
I'll say anger,
Yeah.
disappointment
Okay.
from a lot of fans, especially season ticket holders that said, "Listen, for this game, I bought extra tickets and I had to pay 4 times the price of what a regular ticket was." I think the goodwill should have, if it was going to come from the organization, it should have been during the ticket buying process, not after the fact. Oh, Messi didn't show up. Let's try to make up for it with a free ticket. You know, maybe there should have been friendlier prices for at least the loyal fans.
Well, yeah.
But again, maybe it's too late for that now. And at the end, it's a learning opportunity for the organization that unfortunately they didn't have to learn this the hard way, but they did.
They did. Laura, your take before we talk about what happened on the field or what didn't happen on the field, is this leave a stain in the organization's profile, if you will? Was this a missed opportunity? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I mean, I don't know if it leaves a stain. I do think that it's going to leave a burn in the sentiment of a lot of people that have been following the Dynamo. Of, again, like I mentioned before, of putting more emphasis and more marketing on a player that's not part of your team, selling the tickets for a higher price.
Right.
It's just a lot of elements that perhaps doesn't have to do a lot with, did Messi make it or not? Because a lot of people, yeah, Messi's one of the best players in the world that's ever existed. But a lot of people are like, oh, it is what it is. I want to watch, the Dynamo. And that's a valid sentiment as well. But I do think that it brings a lot of attention to the team itself and how it's treated perhaps a lot of their followers and the way that they manage the marketing again and just a lot of things. So I don't know if just because Messi didn't show up, it's going to bring, tar their reputation. But I do think it does highlight a lot of the things that they did prior to this game.
So yeah, I will admit there have been teams. It has been a habit in MLS for opposing teams to rest some of their players against the Dynamo, and maybe you could say that's a lack of respect. Maybe that's how they feel. Maybe they feel they don't have to send their best players to win a game in Houston, or maybe they just don't like playing in Houston. Whatever the reason, it's not the first time that other teams rest their players, but it's the first time it's probably mattered as far as the gate, and that's why we're talking about it.
As you can see right now on the screen, we are rolling a little bit of the highlights of this second match of the season, of the regular MLS season. And what happened on the field, Laura, is something that now it's become chronic in 2 games for this Houston team. Defensive lapses, defensive mistakes that led to goals. It really is. Well, where do we start dissecting the game itself, Laura?
I mean, I think that it's just a lot because I think that everything that could have gone wrong went wrong in that game. I think that the defense crumbled. The goalie was making a lot of rookie mistakes. The midfield wasn't putting those balls where they had to, and the forwards weren't scoring because there was at least one or two opportunities that perhaps would have been like for sure clear shots and scores. So I think that there's they're lacking in all the departments, unfortunately. I don't know what it was, but this game made it clear that they need to do and they need to work on. Perhaps as the season continues, we might hopefully see a team that's perhaps more secure themselves, know each other a little bit more, and are able to either concentrate in defending or concentrate in scoring because they didn't neither. If a team, sets back in defense, we're like, okay, what's a team that's defensive, which is the style that the Dynamo has done, for many years now. But they lacked a lot in that department too. So it's like, what are you going to do? If you're not going to score, you're going to get scored on, but you're not scoring either. So it's just a team that showed a lot of holes.
And Victor, I turn to you now about what happened on the field. Earlier, you mentioned, who is the Houston Dynamo organization going to market? They don't have a name like Suárez. They don't have a name like Messi. But even younger players like Segovia were running circles around the team. Some of the comments that I heard, and I'm trying to be objective, it's early in the season, Ben Olsen set a very low bar expectation that this is going to take time. But this is a completely different team, Victor, that doesn't have a real DP, if you will. Is that the hope? Is that where we're hanging on to here, Victor? That this is just early, and by the summer transaction windows and time, that a big name is coming and this is going to be turned around? I'm trying to be optimistic here, but is that reality?
That is the long con. That
you use that word intentionally, don't you?
No, because it's true. It's true because they say the DP is coming, the reinforcements are coming, but it was their choice to sell players. It was their choice to let go of Carrasquilla for a profit, or maybe, or at least just to offload them. They can say it was to send them to a different team because that was his wish. Whatever. If you're a team that wants to win, wouldn't you try to hold on to your best players? Wouldn't you go for a championship? Again, I don't think they made full use of that window where they had a player like Héctor Herrera playing at his best. Look, maybe he wasn't the answer, but you could have replaced Héctor Herrera already with another designated player. I think stringing fans along saying there's going to be a DP, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But the way they're moving, the urgency that they have, it doesn't necessarily paint that picture. And again, you've let go of Mikael, you've let go of Adalberto Carrasquilla, you've let go of Héctor Herrera, Steve Clark, if you want to include him in that mix of players that were at least for sure starters and were helping your team to win. And you haven't reinforced your team. I get all this talk about depth. Where is it? Where is the depth? If Franco Escobar and Eric Sviatchenko are injured, who are the guys behind them? Oh, by the way, we still don't have an actual left back because Franco Escobar is still converted. And this is what happens. I mean, I think, again, it's a lesson they chose to learn the hard way because no disrespect to Andrew Tarbell or to Bassi or to Kowalczyk or to Ibrahim. These players, I think, they're set in a bad position. They're not set to succeed because they're not going to be players that win you games. I think that's been evident now with the scoring problems, and now that defensively, you've opened yourself up. Again, Artur, I don't think he's a bad player, but he doesn't have those two elements that he had in midfield next to him, and that's it makes it harder for a player like him. Ezequiel Ponce, he may be a goal scorer. We can't find out because they don't give him the adequate support. So, and again, they've built this roster. They put it together. Nicolás Lodeiro was a great pickup. He scored yesterday. I wish we had 10 Nicolás Lodeiros, right? But we don't. Jack McGlynn, bless his heart. He's a good, he looks to be a good talent. He could improve. I don't know if he's going to stunt his growth on this team because, again, I don't know if he's that much of a remarkable player that he's going to succeed in spite of what's been going on here. But look, ultimately, we've seen it in the past. When an opposing team has players that could break down this defense, important players who can score goals, right? Like Columbus has done with the Cucho Hernandez in the past, or maybe in LAFC, with their stars. It's no secret. It's no secret. So it's been a long time coming, and now the harsh reality is here, and they have no one to blame but themselves.
Well, and look, I don't disagree with most of what you've said, the context you've given it, and the reality, which is the results on the field. Now, here's the question, Victor. If as you've put it, and I'm using your words here, if that's the midterm and long-term con of the expectation of what's coming, if it doesn't come, I mean, it's 2 games into the 2025 season. If things don't improve dramatically quickly.
Well, and that's the other thing, Alex. The schedule's been out for a couple of months.
True.
They knew what was coming.
True. Well, but the reality is this now, or my question, Victor, and to you, Laura, as well, for us to discuss is this it? Where's the pressure? This could have been an amazing moment of judging where you stand against the best team in the league, meaning the game against Inter Miami. And we saw the result on the field. It wasn't even close, and without Messi. So
or at least Alex, maybe if they had put up a fight, they would at least have won
Sure.
some fans over like they did in
Agreed.
the prior years. When they lost to Pachuca, I remember in those classics, at least they won people over because of the fight that team showed.
Look,
You had no fight yesterday.
Victor, they did not. It's still early. Infantile mistakes, and that's a tough word to use. But when these mistakes get repeated over and over again, it's a missed opportunity from my perspective with the casual fan that was expecting a Messi and saw a superior team to the local team. They may never get that back. It's a missed opportunity for someone that maybe is a season ticket holder and had to pay more money to watch that score line. So it's a missed opportunity there. And it's a missed opportunity to show the league, you know what, even with our choices, the money we're not spending, we can still compete. I don't want to say it was a total failure, but it certainly is not one of the best chapters of this team. Laura, is there still time to turn this around? Is there still hope? Is there still a possibility that the playoffs loom? And I know it's early, and what we've seen so far is on the field, off the field, has not been perfect. Let me put it that way.
I mean, the playoffs seem so very, 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 very far away, just based on these 2 games. Is Miami the best team in the league right now? I don't know. The season just started. Just because they have those names doesn't mean that they aren't good. I mean, they got kicked out by Atlanta last season, and they play them I think in 2 weeks. So we'll see. We'll see how they square up with the team that eliminated them. As far as the Dynamo, I think that they need to do a lot because, I mean, the Dynamo has been known to be penny pinchers and getting their players. They've had some luck here and there getting players that, did somewhat scoring here and there that they've brought from Honduras, from, Colombia. They brought players from there. Some Mexican players that really didn't do as well as they wanted them to do. I just think that it's been a lot of hit and miss with this mentality of let's get players that are, I want to say more economical and bet that way. And a lot of, teams have done that. But it's for whatever reason has worked out for them. There's players like you mentioned, Segovia players that a lot of people don't know who they are. They're really young, but it's working out for Miami. So why doesn't somewhat of that strategy work out for the Dynamo? Of course, Miami has a complement of very experienced players. So when you put a young person like that, maybe they flourish more than with players that are on the same boat as that young player. So it's just a lot to break down in a short podcast. It's like years and years of layering of what's going on now and not really being really shaken up to really create a core difference in the club.
Victor, Ben Olsen, what responsibility does he have in any of this? And are these just the cards that have been dealt to him? And in our interaction with him, in covering him, again, he was very cautious about the way he set expectations for this season. But it's quickly turned into, hey, don't expect much. This is going to take time. To, hey, Houston, to use the cliche, we have a problem. Victor, there's definitely a problem here from my perspective. And what can be done at this point to not have it continue to get worse? And psychologically, that's 6 points at home that are gone, that you're not going to get back later. So is it Ben Olsen? Are Ben Olsen's hands tied? Because this is the roster that's been handed to him.
I think look, and I've been a big critic of Ben Olsen. I think in this season, he has a right to say, I don't have the players. You're sending me out to, uh, you know, you're sending me out with a pick and an axe, right? Um, to that end, I will say what he is responsible for is trying to get results with what he has. If his style of play isn't working, again, you gotta adapt or die. And I think in prior years, um, like I've said it, I think credit where credit is due up to a point, but
So
having a Hector Herrera on the field changed some of the tactics and changed the way this team opened up. That now it's evident when you don't have that, or when you don't have other players as well. I think this obsession to play out of the back. First of all, you saw how it cost him in the first game. This obsession to play inverted when you have, speedsters out on the wing. This obsession to play the ball inward instead of trying from distance. I mean, I think there's different things that they could do to open up the attack that they choose not to do because they don't want to take risk. In not taking risk, they're able to be narrow and defend, and they're content. They're content with trying to win games 1-0. And I don't think you can operate that way. Now, to your earlier question, I do think there's enough time and they can still make the playoffs, but that's more because of the system that MLS has, where more than half of the teams make the playoffs. I mean, it's meant to give teams, even the worst teams, a chance to still be able to sneak in, right, at the last possible moment. So it's a system of mediocrity to begin with. When you say, where's the pressure coming from? It has to come internally, because externally, some fans are content. Some fans have given up, and maybe they get tired of screaming at air, right?
So
and then the media coverage, we know, is bare, is thin.
Well, Victor, I don't want to get into a long soccer conversation, meaning a technical, but Victor, this has been something I've been seeing, and you and I have talked about this when we're watching matches. Everyone wants to play a certain way, okay? This past Sunday at Shell, we saw two teams that tried, if you think about it, to play the same way. One did and was very successful. The other has limitations. What frustrates me is that this trickles down to the youth level, Victor. Everyone wants to play tiki-taka. Everybody wants to play like Barcelona back in the day. It's like me trying to play in the NBA. It's not going to happen. I don't have the ability. I don't have the age. I don't have the athleticism to ever play in the NBA. I can dream about it. I can go out in my backyard and train train that way. But when I have to really put up, it's not going to happen. This may be a lesson, Victor, of change. Why can't you, when you're in trouble, send the ball long and away from your goal and reset defensively, instead of poor Jack, who had his back to the Miami players, didn't even look, released the ball and quickly was pounced upon, and that led to the first Inter-Miami goal. Why put the young man in that situation? The system needs to adapt to the quality of player that you have. And I think that applies at 8-year-olds and at the professional level. Victor, might this be time for a change when it comes to the reality of this? It just seems so obvious. How can you continue hitting your head against the wall? It's not working.
And unfortunately, they're living in a world where it's worked for them in the past, and they think because it's worked in the past,
Sure.
The past 2 seasons to be exact, that it's a winning formula. It's not. I think there were other factors. I've mentioned Hector Herrera, the main one of why they won in some of those seasons, especially in 2023. Maybe this is a crude reality for them. I think it was a long time coming, and the reality is here. And look, I'm not saying throw the book out the window.
Right.
But I do think different games call for different challenges. And, again, to me, it's risk it a little bit more. You can't have such an unbalanced.
Well,
I'm not against defense. I've said this before. But you can't be so unbalanced one way or the other to where you compromise, your entire team. And then there's some things they do that goes against the logic of winning games.
Victor.
Because they're so obsessed with data. They're so obsessed with chance creation and whatever the hell. They would just worry about putting the ball in the back of the net.
Sure. Laura, on the way, the style of play that the Dynamo have, what can be done to salvage the expectation and then the reality, or the hope and then the ability that players have? Victor, and I'll have Laura comment, but when you see something isn't working at the professional level, you should be able to adapt quickly. That's what I didn't see on Sunday, Laura. A quick adjustment to Miami. You made an early mistake again, and that led to 3 goals at halftime. There was very little, there was no change. There was no, maybe because it wasn't there. Maybe you just they couldn't do it. Laura, I'll be quiet and have you chime in.
I mean, I think that, again, it's a question that has a lot of layers to it. I think that it kind of honestly reminded me of like high school soccer, when a team obviously is superior to you, and you get the first score, against you, and you're kind of like, okay, well, 1 goal, we can do this, we made a mistake, and you're like trying to get back to what you need to do to be able to, not get scored on and score a goal and then get another one and another one and another one. It's just the first half. I think that mentally also, many of them kind of checked out and said, I want this game to be over. I was watching the game with my husband, and he's like, man, I'm sure the poor goalie wants this to be over. And it's done. The entire game he's done, because obviously the defense isn't helping him out either. So that comment, to me, it's kind of like, it's hard to see in a professional setting and knowing that they're in the same league, and the mistakes that they made. So I think that, can they get better? I mean, yeah, maybe. I think that not only them doing changes of like plays or passes or strategies, I think that obviously in these 2 games we've seen that there's a lack of attacking, player. I think that there's it's just a lot.
A lack of options.
It's a lot that needs to be done. And again, you can't ask of a player that even though, like you mentioned, they want to give it their all, are going to be outplayed. It's just the sad truth, reality sometimes, that there's players that even though you give it more than them, physically or maybe mentally, they're just blessed with more abilities or more speed or strength or whatever it is, that they outrun you. So you have to adjust, like you said. But even if you adjust, sometimes a team is just going to overbear you. And that's what happened to the Dynamo.
Victor, where does the team go from here? It's still early in the season. A lot of games to be played. You don't give up, without a doubt. You learn from these mistakes. The team was somewhat competitive against Dallas in the opener. A team with Lucho Acosta, who has done very well, and maybe we could talk a little bit about Lucho and what he's done in Dallas. But where does the team go from here? The Houston Dynamo, I mean, relative to what's left, there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, short term, hopefully they can be more aggressive, right? Again, the Champions Cup thing works both ways. Maybe it meant, in theory, here's the thing. We should be saying this should have been an easier game for them because Messi wasn't playing. Maybe should have been at least more winnable, right? If you're their chance ended up happening still. So Columbus is in between games as well in the CONCACAF Champions Cup. They're going to be playing. Look, they got to go all the way out to LA to play that first leg. Then they'll be back home, and then they're maybe, depending on what happens, they're looking to that second leg game the following week. I think Houston's got nothing to lose in this road game. Go out there, be aggressive, try a couple different things. But we'll see. We'll see if it's still the same conservative approach. And I think, give different players a chance. I would assume that Sviatchenko, Escobar, they'd probably be a little bit healthier for this game. But, you got to talk to this kid, Ethan Bartlow, and get him out of his funk, right? Maybe see what you got out of some of these other kids. I know Dueñas came on briefly. Maybe you start with Lodeiro from the beginning, and that's something that you try, since that's something that's opening up your attack. Siegel, I don't know what he's, or Segal, however you say his name. I don't see him being a much better option than Ponce. Yeah. You got to get Ponce on the board in this game, I think, as well.
So Victor, at some point, the team has to face reality. The team has to face all these factors. It can be a very cold shower. It can be a very cold reality.
But they have nothing to worry about.
Where's the pressure? What I'm trying to say is this. The pressure's not coming from the media. And look, we have been around the team, and the lack of coverage, and I'm going to use that term, okay? The lack of coverage relative to the Texans, to the Astros, to the Rockets, doesn't put any pressure on the organization. Rightly or wrongly, I think I'm stating a fact. I think many media outlets find the Dash and the Dynamo as, oh, by the way, we got to cover this story every so often. We saw that with the U.S. Open Cup, and the reality of how media had no idea what this was.
This was the most attention they're going to get all year from media.
That's correct. It didn't resonate. It didn't resonate because of Houston players, but because of Messi. And then at that point, it's like, oh, I guess I got to cover this. I have heard of this Messi guy, so I guess this must be interesting. My point is, though, where's the pressure going to come from, Victor, if it's not the media, if it's not the sports media, if it's not internal because of budget constraints, and that's what we're seeing, I guess it has to come from the fans, right? The fans have to be the ones that demand more, or else? Question mark?
I don't think it will, but it should. I mean,
you mean the fans? The fans are just happy with what the team is doing.
Well, some fans are. Some fans are. I think some fans are just happy to be at games and support their team, and there's nothing wrong with that. But again, that's what this team has been beaten down to. Your loyal fans who want to see a better team on the field. Maybe some have left, taking their money elsewhere. And again, I think the supporters groups, if we're going to talk about the people who lead maybe the voice of the fans, right? I don't see them being displeased with this team. I don't know what it's going to take. I haven't seen them displeased. I think, and maybe all they care is about competing for the Open Cup. Maybe they're happy with that. And if that's what they're happy with, then that's probably what they're going to continue to get, competing for the Open Cup. But if you really want to see this team go for it all, if you want to see them compete for MLS Cups, hell, compete for the CONCACAF Champions Cup, try to get in a Club World Cup, I mean, you have to ask for more. It's a big city. It's one of the biggest cities in the United States. To not have a big star on this team, I think, just my opinion, you're seeing history repeat itself.
Victor,
maybe it's not Matt Jordan, maybe it's not Gabriel Brenner, but you're starting to see elements. I think we've seen elements. I've said it all along, which is why I didn't like the signing of Ben Olsen, because I thought they were compromising making the playoffs to keep people happy enough and to make them think that you were challenging for titles. When again, this is what was going to happen. The stubborn style, this mirage of competing for championships. When it's really just the Open Cup. And again, I'd like for Ben Olsen to succeed. I'd like him to open up the playbook a little bit, to open up more risk. I think he could be successful if he does it. But
look,
again,
Victor, yeah, forgive me, sir, for interrupting you. My only retort and I guess defense of Ben Olsen is that the team has made the playoffs the previous 2 seasons. This is a completely different team. This is a different scenario. It's not starting well. But I think he and the current approach, at least initially in the season, deserved an opportunity. Let's just see.
I'll give you this. I think he's been the reason why they haven't contended for MLS Cups, because when you had Nectar Herrera giving you an MVP season, you decided to neuter your attack by going with Corey Baird. And we knew how that story was going to finish. And it did finish with eventually getting eliminated. You were only going to get so far. Last year, the referee mistakes, and you can blame some other players, but that's some of the culture that the coach has developed here. After this game, you got players fighting, complaining to the refs still. And again, until that stuff changes, their fate is not going to change. And the people above him, because again, I think internal pressure can help change things.
Right.
It's not going to come from Pat Onstad. It's not going to come from Asher Mendelson. It sure as hell doesn't seem like it's going to come from Ted Siegel. So internally, there is no pressure. They're all on the same page. Media-wise, we're probably as good as fans have it to anything that's critical, if even. And again, if the fans that are left, I think, are happy with the way things are, and more power to them if they're happy that way.
Maybe one of the last comments on the Houston Dynamo here in our Soccer Tejas podcast, the Soccer Tejas podcast, by the way, Laura, and I'm a shameless self-promoter, but I wrote recently, and you can visit deportesnation.com, that the Houston Dynamo have never had a Messi level player. That's just the reality. Hector Herrera is the closest thing that we have seen, and he's no longer with the team, and there was no championship won. But really, if you look at it, if you think about it, if you analyze it, up to this point, other than Herrera, and I will give Ted Siegel and the current ownership group credit for bringing him in, there was no talk of a Beckham here. There was no talk of a Wayne Rooney, of a Chicharito. I guess the question is, why? Is it just because Houston is not ready for that? Is it the weather? And I wrote about that. I talked about that. It's the weather. Is it? I think it came down to money. If you have the money, you want to spend it like Inter Miami, CF have done, you bring in superstars, and it's paying off for them on and off the field.
I mean, to me, it's the weather. No, no, because the Miami weather can be icky and it can be gross. Like the only weather that's perfect for me is California. So
wait, hold on.
It's
the first time we've used the word icky on the podcast, so I appreciate that.
I mean, it had to be said, and it was said. It's icky and sticky and all those things that you can say for Miami. So I don't think the weather for me wouldn't be it. I think that most of us have air conditioning nowadays in our cars, in our homes, and stores. So, I mean, you play outside, and if the players from South America, they've dealt with all kinds of weather, with whether it's raining, whether it's humidity, whether it's height. So the weather for me isn't an issue, and it shouldn't be an issue for a professional player to get adapted to. I honestly think it's the money thing, and I think that it's like a cultural thing in the club that hasn't left, even though they've changed from owners. I think at the beginning when the team came here, they just had a lot of good unknown players that people from outside of Texas or even inside of Texas, inside of Houston, didn't know. I'm going to give you an example. I was an intern in one of the biggest channels here, an English channel, and I begged the sports editor for me to be able to do a story.
You've got to mention the name of the channel.
You want me to?
Of course.
Maybe it wasn't a good issue.
I was an intern in Channel 13. And
ABC 13, yes.
Yes. And in that time, I asked the sports editor if I can do a story on Brian Ching. He's like, who? Mm-hmm. And in my mind, I was like, what do you mean? Like, you're supposed to know everything. In my younger mind, like, you have to know everything. You're the sports director, and like, it's a professional team. It's soccer. Half of the population, and I would say a little bit more now, follow soccer. So for me, I was kind of like, what is going on? Like, what do you mean you don't know who he is? If he's like one of the biggest guys in that team. Mm-hmm. And he was like, well, no, I really don't follow soccer for one. Two, don't follow the Dynamo for a second. And I don't know who he is. He's like, okay, go do the story. And then from there, we did a bigger story. And it was just like, one of the things that I was like, wow, like it opened up my eyes of the lack of coverage of the team. And also that in that moment, there were players that they were good players, not well known. And for a name to be said, for you to be really well known, you have to walk into the room and say Messi. and people are going to know. But in that moment, like if you walked into a place that they didn't follow soccer, especially because it was a newer team in town and you said Brian Ching, a lot of people didn't know. Nowadays, if you're from Houston or got here to Houston and know some of the culture of soccer, you know who he is. But that's the thing. I think they kind of hung on to that of having like quote unquote working players. We don't want to do superstars because a lot of times I've heard that a lot of the press releases, press conferences that we've had in the past of the Dynamo, they're like, we're a team that want working players. We don't do big name players. That's not in our DNA. But unfortunately, when you have other teams that are making that part of their DNA, it's hard to compete marketing wise. It's hard to compete on the field. And I'm not saying that you can't get a bunch of guys from wherever country or from whatever league, and they're going to get here and they can't beat Messi and beat whoever they are. I think that you can do that, but it's going to take a lot of work to just haven't brought the right players.
Yeah, Laura, Victor, there'll be much more about the Houston Dynamo in the Soccer Tejas podcast. There's a lot to dissect, to talk about the history. We didn't even talk about the team celebrating 20 years on this podcast and what that means, the good, the bad, and the ugly of 20 years of Houston Dynamo soccer. So, friends, we encourage you to help us and ask us questions. Send us your comments. Give us your take on whether or not this early in the season, the writing's on the wall for Ben Olsen's team. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But what we've seen thus far, I think is hard to ocultar. It's hard to hide. And I wish, Victor, I'll let you have the last word. I wish there was a quick fix to this, but from my perspective, on or off the field, this is not looking great. And I'll unfortunately compare it to the Houston Dash last season, a perfect storm of negativity, a perfect storm of things going wrong, and you know where that team ended up. We'll talk about that here shortly, but the last word on the Dynamo, at least the last word for now, Victor, on the Dynamo 2025.
Let's hope, again, better these lessons come at the start of the season. Let's hope if they're willing to change. Let's see if this designated player will eventually get here and what he looks like. And look, I don't imagine it's going to be anything out of this world. Like we mentioned, I think there is if they say it or not, there's a certain budget that they're willing to spend, even though with a DP spot, you can spend as much as you want in theory. I would like them to see, I would have liked them to have gone, if they're going to change the book, change the page, fine. The Herrera era is over. You could have brought in James Rodriguez and you would have pulled the Colombian population here in Houston. You would have filled that stadium. You wouldn't have to worry about Messi selling out your own stadium for, one time a year. But I suppose they weren't interested. Maybe they can try to give him a phone call, try to give his agent a phone call, try to see what the status of that is. If not, there's other players in Europe that they can still bring in that are big names. If they're willing to spend the money. They weren't so much with Herrera. It was still a free transfer. I wonder how much, again, if the league helped them out with anything, I still think until proven otherwise, until they bring another star, I think it was a move to basically prove that they weren't prior ownership and they weren't just cheap old Dynamo. And, well, we're starting to see some of the same habits happen again and again. Maybe we didn't get into all of the 20 years, but I think we got into enough of it that you get the idea of what has been, at least in the recent history of the Houston Dynamo, the problem.
Friends, thanks for joining us here on the Soccer Tejas Podcast. First edition, by the way, first episode of 2025. We've talked a little bit about the start of the MLS season relative to the Houston Dynamo. And now we're going to switch to the other professional soccer team in town, the Houston Dash. And we had the opportunity to be present at the, I guess we'll call it the presentation of the two people that you see on screen, the new president of women's soccer, Angela Huckles-Mangano, and also the new head coach, Fabrice Gautreau, who is coming in first time as a head coach in the NWSL. And Laura, I'll turn to you. We just mentioned and talked about what happened last season with the Houston Dash. The coach, the star player, the lack of support. The team ended up in last place in competition. Everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong. If you're either one of these new players, new executive and coach to the team, what mindset do you come in with that it can't get any worse than last season?
I wouldn't go into a team thinking that publicly, or I would try to take it out of your mind to say, this is the rock bottom, because there's always worse. So I think that I would concentrate on building with what you have. And, there's a lot of players that for me are fundamental, that are still in the Dash with a lot of experience. Sophie Schmidt, we have Jane Campbell. I think that those two have been with the good and the bad of the team. And I think that they have a lot of experience and a lot of, knowledge of what the team has gone through. They've been with good coaches. They've been with bad coaches. They've been through so many coaches. So I think that I would concentrate on building of what we have and what can be done better. There were some, new players here and there, but again, it's kind of like a sentiment within the Houston club itself of, mimicking kind of like what the Dynamo does, of not having big names. I think that the biggest one for me that they hired this season has been Yasmin, and I think that she did an amazing job in the She Believes Cup, the one that was played here against Colombia.
Right.
With just seeing her play, I was like, okay, maybe there's hope, and seeing Jane, do what she could do, although there wasn't, unfortunately, a lot of attack from the Colombian side. I think that she still was involved in the game, and I think that being able to see those players play internationally and wearing the U.S. jersey, knowing that they play for the Dash, I think that it motivates them, and I think it can also motivate fans to support them. If they can do so well with the national team, I mean, just imagine what they can do with the Dash, if given the proper tools, of course, and the proper support.
Victor, your take on the start of the Dash season. We're only a few days away from the start of the regular season, and we'll talk about the season and the expectations. The team was out in California and the Palm Springs area with preseason. That's a lovely place to be this time of year, by the way. So I think that unites them in some ways. We'll also talk about, Victor, an addition of a local coach, the former coach at the University of Houston, Jaime Frias, who's now an assistant with the team. I think that's a very interesting story, and we'll talk to Jaime in the next couple of weeks and days and weeks about that move. And I think there's some interesting notes there from college to professional. But what is, as we go into the start of the season, what is your expectation for this Dash team, Victor?
Well, I would imagine that they can only improve from here, which is a bit of a slippery slope, because if they don't finish last, but if they finish fourth last in the table, I mean, I guess that's improvement. But is that, again, where is the pressure? What is the bar set? Obviously, they're going to say try to make the playoffs. But if they don't, I mean, I don't know. I guess, just go out there and win is the simplest way I can say it. I wish them luck. I would advise them not to commit the same mistakes that they've done in the past. But I've already seen some of them here in preseason where, everything's locked up, everything's hush-hush, secret. They had a game the other day, I believe, with Dallas Trinity. That would have been a great opportunity. Like they say, their community, open up the stadium, invite people. What are you hiding? I mean, just, again, bring the game to the people. Don't make this a closed environment, whatever.
Victor,
hopefully they can start putting in a good group together. I like the pickup, Jasmine Ryan. I don't think she'll have the same support she has with the national team on the Dash. But again, the most important thing is they got to start the season off with 3 points, start winning, start getting results. That's really the only way they're going to move this thing forward somewhat. And then, of course, the rest, we've talked about the marketing and the actual community effort behind it, grassroots, to get this team some support.
Laura, Victor, you've mentioned, and we've talked about this, and I'm going to call it the Mexican player experiment with the Houston Dynamo and the Houston Dash. Apparently has not been working. And what specifically do I mean, Alex? And I'm not trying to come across as some kind of racist, that someone will accuse me of that. But when the season started last year for the Dash, you had Maria Sanchez, Mexican national team player, as the face, as the voice of the team. She clearly wasn't happy here. She ended up leaving. This was, I think, the beginning of the end of several dominoes that fell. Hector Herrera, finally, we talked about Messi, or a Messi-level player. Arguably, Hector Herrera was that player. No longer here. I think if we count up, he had maybe 1 or 2 sellouts in the stadium. Many people, for many years, friends have talked about, you know what, this team, these teams need a Mexican national team player of high profile, someone at that level, and the stadium will be full. I think facts speak for themselves. Laura, Sanchez didn't do it. Herrera didn't do it. Is it time to head in a different direction?
Honestly, I think that at this point, I don't think necessarily the background has to be Mexican. It could be anything at this point, Argentinian, European, I mean, Chilean, any, whatever other player has a magnitude status.
Right.
I think that we're at that point. I think that it does have to be a well-known player. Again, we go into that circle of kind of like what their brother club does, bring players that are not known, and try to build them, which I think is fine, because Messi wasn't Messi, the day he woke up, he wasn't like the major star that he is now. So I think everybody starts somewhere, but I mean, does that have to do with who is choosing the players? Is it the scouts? I mean, do we have to dig deeper and see what's going on? Was it how they're building, and were they not given the tools to grow to the potential that they had? I think that there's a lot of questions there, but
Laura, forgive me for interrupting you. My greater point, though, is from a marketing point of view. From a marketing point of view, a Mexican national team player for the Dynamo and a Mexican national team player for the Dash did not make a significant difference. Or am I wrong? It did move the needle.
No. I mean, no. I think that you're right. I think that they did do a little bump of what it was before. I think so. I just think, again, the name Maria Sanchez. Yes, she was well known with Tigres, and a lot of people that followed Tigres did start to come to the stadium just to watch her.
Sure.
Because when she left, people were like, "Well, I'm not going anymore." So it was that sentiment. So there was a lot of people that were following her, but I think that the Dash needs somebody that's a little bit broader, a little bit more. I think that maybe the reaction would have been different. It would have been, instead of, Achache, if it would have been, I don't know, maybe Chicharito, or, I don't know, a player that has played overseas, and it's a little bit more well-known than just like the national Mexican team. Achache has played overseas and things like that, but did he make a bigger impact, compared to these other superstar players that are in the MLS? So I think that the marketing point, I think it is important to, want to convey and have more players that attract fans. But at this point, I think that they have to go broader than just catering perhaps to the Mexican fans. I think that it's a good start. I think that it's necessary, because there's a lot of Mexicans here, and they do drive a lot of money, a lot of power in the soccer, because we've seen it. When they bring Pachuca, when they bring Monterrey, when they bring the national Mexican team, I mean, it's sellouts.
Sure.
Even if the Mexican team isn't doing so well, I mean, they're still having major sellouts, if not sellouts, close to sellouts. And with the games of, the Liga MX, they're having, a good attendance. So I think that there's strategies there that they can pick up on. But I think that there's something lacking. I think that the next players that they do bring, I think it has to be somebody that's extremely well known. Will that happen? I don't know. What player can they bring? I mean, we were talking about, James perhaps wanting to leave Mexico because of the insecurities of that he feels sometimes insecure. I don't know. I mean, maybe he'll come to the MLS. Will he come to the Dynamo? I don't know. Does he like this weather? I mean, I think that it's something that can be talked about, but will James be big enough? I mean, Colombians know him, maybe perhaps the teams that he's played for know, the fans know him, but will he make an impact here in the community that we have in Houston? So it's not only do you have to look at nationalities, but I think that you also have to look at the fans that follow him, because a player has to have that power to attract people from different nationalities, which is something that Cristiano Ronaldo does, which is something that Messi does. So I think that they have to focus on a player that has no country, no bounds when people follow them.
Well, and that type of player, Victor, is going to cost you a lot of money because he or she on the Dash side need to be well known, need to be at the national team level. And if you are correct, Laura, and I agree with you, it has to go beyond just a nationality. It has to be someone that has already have a proven track record. Victor, is that in the cards for either one of these teams?
I don't think it is, unfortunately, because I think, again, I don't know if they have that willingness to spend. And you can mention what they did here. Maybe that's also discouraged them from spending even more. I think, again, I agree with Laura there. I think there was a bit of a bump in attendance. But again, I don't think they nurtured these players with the appropriate type of marketing. And that happens with any nationality. I mean, it's few the superstars that just attract, fans to the stadium. I think a James could do that in the same way a Chicharito or a Vela used to do that for the Mexican market. Ultimately, that dies off, right? It loses a bit of shine, and that's where you have to continually remind people or get them back, bring them back into the stadium. Again, endear more and more fans to want to follow these players. They can bring anybody from the Salvadoran community, from Honduras, from any of these Central American countries. They had them in the past. It was the same mistake. They didn't market them enough. They didn't do enough to reach out and get those people from those communities to come to the stadium. They have a U.S. men's national team player now, right? Supposedly, in Jack McGlynn. Are they going to market him? I mean, again, I think it doesn't matter the nationality, but you got to put in some work to get people down there. And then even if you did get somebody like a James Rodriguez or a Neymar or whomever, right? What's going to be the strategy? Are they going to all of a sudden skyrocket the ticket prices like they did for this Messi game? Because I don't know if fans are necessarily going to go to show that many amount of dollars, especially more than once. So then if that happens, are they going to say, oh, well, look, the community's not responding. They're not supporting James. We brought him and they're not showing up. Well, I mean, maybe there's other factors too that you got to consider, right? So I first of all, I don't think it's even in the conversation because I don't think they're gonna get a player like that. I would like to see it, and then if they do, I hope they also put in the work to market them as well.
Well, there you have it, at least for the start of 2025, the struggles of the Houston Dynamo short term and the optimism that hopefully exists for the Houston Dash with a new president of women's soccer, with a new head coach. Let's try to finish maybe on a positive note, on an optimistic note. Laura, what's on your mind relative to the world of soccer, be it local, be it national, be it international? What is your take as we wrap up this edition of the Soccer Tejas Podcast?
I mean, I want to talk about soccer, but positive note. Let's see. I don't want the Dash to leave. I know that we actually took a story out as well, so check that out on our website about, Victor asked a very good, straightforward question of, is the Dash going to be sold? And if they're sold, are you thinking about relocation? Which I think it brought back a lot of fear to a lot of people that followed women's sports, professional women's sports here in Houston, because the Comets, and knowing that the Comets, were champions, not once, not twice, but it's just traumatizing for fans that follow women's sports, and we're currently in what is it, the Women's Month? What is it called? What's the proper name? What do they call it? Women's Month?
Sports Month?
No, it's like the women's. I don't know. I'll get back to you guys. I don't know the proper political name, but this is the month to highlight even more what women have done for society, and I think that. keeping a women's sports team here in Houston
Women's
is
History
essential.
Month.
And I just saw that Serena Williams actually is the new owner of the Toronto Tempo. And it's the Canadian first ever WNBA team. So I think that's something positive, having more women own women professional sports team. I think that's a major step. So I think that's on my mind, being on the supporting again. Women have come a long way in sports, but I think that there's so much more that we can do, especially in the kind of climate that we're in the United States, trying to take away the voices of minorities. And women are part of minorities too, no matter what color, we're still considered minorities. So I think that it's important, if you're in that, ambient of being in sports and being a woman, you know how hard it is, whether you're a player, whether you're a coach, an owner, or even a sports broadcaster, you know the difficulties that you've had. So I just want to uplift that. And I think that it's important for us, and I say us as you guys that are men, that are Latinos, to also support women's sports and sports in general for women.
Agreed. At all levels. That's a great take to wrap up. Victor, what's on your mind? And maybe we can finish on a positive note. I know there's been a lot of maybe not so positive mentions today, but Victor, what's on your mind, sir?
Well, of course I can finish on a positive note. Look, I think, again, taking the glass half full approach here, we've had to, and I'll say it to Shell Energy Stadium exclusively, because I know a lot gets talked about NRG and what goes on over there and the events they have. To have two events at Shell Energy Stadium, like the U.S. Women's National Team coming in for the She Believes Cup, this Inter Miami game where you still got to see a Luis Suárez, a Jordi Alba Busquets, and obviously the hope of it could have been with Messi and what that would have been, and it still drew a good attendance. Again, if you wanted to take a lesson here, I will mention it again, not to be negative, but to address that, there was an opportunity here, maybe with a little bit more effort, more marketing, more boots on the ground, whatever it had to be. You could have had multiple of what you enjoyed in these games. So I hope that's an inspiration. I would hope that's an inspiration for the local clubs, for the team, to put forth more investment. Not see it as an added cost, but see it as we still got hope here. It's not all dead in the ground yet. If we put some effort in here, I mean, this thing could really be special. We talked about the the 20 seasons. Maybe Messi not having him here, that took away a bit of the luster and poo-pooed on that celebration. But there's still a whole year ahead. Like they said, it's a long season in both cases. And I would hope that the club proves me wrong and acts and goes all in on this soccer community. And I wouldn't be glad. I would be glad to be wrong, actually, because I think, again, things may be taken in a certain way, the way we say it, the way I say it. Certainly, I know it comes off strong, but it's a way because I feel it has to be said.
Sure.
And nobody else says it, and even the people that say it nicely get, thrown off to the side. But I think you can see the potential there. There always is. Hopefully, it inspires the local clubs to want to invest more in our sport.
Victor, I echo a lot of your sentiments there. It is important that the organization, Houston Dynamo, Houston Dash, and like Laura mentioned, hopefully the Dash staying here for many, many years. In that spotlight, there comes a responsibility, and it goes beyond just, hey, can I take care of myself here? I think, and I've talked about this publicly for many, many years. To me, Shell Energy Stadium should be the cathedral to soccer in our city, which means that it goes beyond just what can the fan do in buying tickets to be there. What can the organization give back? How is the organization involved with the community? And there's many ways. And again, that's a whole other podcast or series of podcasts, because it goes deep into the youth. It goes deep into investment. It goes deep into ownership. It goes deep into our sports culture. There's so much there. But I agree with you, and maybe I'll end by saying this. I'm still very optimistic and hopeful. 20 years of professional soccer in Houston. Never thought I'd talk about that. A soccer-specific stadium. Never thought that would be a reality. The World Cup coming to Houston in 2026. Never thought I would talk about that in my lifetime. Laura, you mentioned how a local sports channel wasn't even aware of soccer. For years, that ignorance has existed, whether it's intentional or whether it's just out of pure lack of knowledge. But the world is changing. I look at both of you and I see you as sports journalists. We didn't have your kind of level of bilingual, bicultural, multilingual, multicultural sports journalists 20 years ago, not 30 years ago. Things are improving. Things may look bad, but I always like to come across, and I generally believe there's more positive than negative. So yes, I'll take the glass. And by the way, I like your wine glass there, Laura, if you could hold it up. I do see it as more as half full than half empty. She finished
water.
Yeah, she finished her white wine off. But there you go. So I think it's an interesting and great time for soccer. Can we do better? Absolutely. Is there a responsibility from the leadership at many levels? Absolutely. And hopefully they're aware of it. So as we wrap up, guys, first of all, thank you, Victor. Thank you, Laura, for joining me in this first edition of 2025 of the Soccer Tejas Podcast. We'll have more. We'll have also more of our reporting, more of our social media postings. So keep up with us at deportesnation.com, at Deportes Nation on all the social media, at Soccer Tejas as well. We'll have content as we continue to build up this year. So, friends, more importantly, thanks to all of you that take the time to watch us, to listen to us, to follow us. Yes, Laura has fans beyond her mom and dad, and also Victor has...
Yes, many more.
Victor has one or two fans out there beyond our family. So on behalf of Victor Araiza, on behalf of Laura Gomez, I'm Alex Parra. Thanks to all of you for following us on this, the latest edition of the Soccer Tejas Podcast.